100 years, securities were personal property. If your account provider, your broker or your custodian became insolvent, you could take immediate return of your securities. That is no longer the case.
America is in trouble. The Federal Reserve can be summarized in 3 words. It's a scam. I never realized it was the most profoundly corrupt institution in the world, pretending to be honorable.
Mr. Webb came out with his book and people began to read it, and constituents started calling me and saying, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't realize this and I didn't realize that, and I can lose everything that I own.
So I've written this book, The Great Taking, to put on the table a very sophisticated structure designed to take essentially all financial collateral globally.
In 1994, the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code, changed wording regarding securities. What it meant that the stocks that you and I purchase can be used as collateral to guarantee loans for that investment firm.
1994 Article 8 revision, they conjured a new type of property ownership or property right called a securities entitlement. That's a contract. So it isn't a security in the sense that you thought you used to own something on paper.
You own securities, you own, the number that says on your brokerage statement, but securities, are more fungible in that respect.
I just want to regurgitate what I think I'm hearing. So given the fact that these securities are in a pool, they are using the securities in the pool as collateral, but you don't know necessarily if they're using yours or somebody else's.
That's my understanding.
The financial system, the custodians, are empowered to borrow the securities out of the pool without any limit at all.
Taking that the next step, which would mean potentially if your investment firm went bankrupt, your assets could be pledged to that.
The secured creditors have absolute assurance that they will keep the client collateral in the event of insolvency. And this is the shocker, not your insolvency, but insolvency of the people that secretly used your securities as collateral.
That's insane. That's ridiculous. We all own our own property. I pulled out the book and read the section of code he was talking about and said, I'll be damned. I read that the same way he does. So there is a legitimate concern. As individuals, these are our securities. We're not pledging them for any institution, but by God, it's ours.
I'm glad that they're bringing this bill and hopefully we'll make sure that at least the citizens of Tennessee are the highest priority when it comes to their assets being protected, and if anything happens, God forbid it does, that they'll get their assets back.
The derivatives complex, so it gone from 100 to 700 trillion in 5 years. It's now estimated to be maybe 2 quadrillion.
I didn't even know quadrillion was actually a real word. I thought it was something I made up when I was 7.
They don't need your money. They can create unlimited money. It is about subjugation of people. We're in a hybrid war that is open-ended.
Kissinger said a long time ago, if you want to control people, you control food. If you want to control nations, you control oil. If you want to control the world, you control money.
So if what you're using as a monetary value is not your property, you have none. You have nothing. You are a slave. The average person is doomed. They have to wake up. They have to learn a little bit about what the real world is about. They have to stop buying into the myth.
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ann Vandersteel. Welcome to Steel News. It is Wednesday, March 26th at 1:06 p.m. Yeah, we are still in the war zone. If you've been paying attention to the news, it is a fire hose, as everybody says, that's in this business. And it's nonstop. It's an assault on our senses, and it's assault on the intelligence. This is an information war like none other. But of course, there's so many distractions out there because this is by design to keep you on your heels, living in fear and just trying to survive. And, as we go through this great awakening process, we are now very well attuned to the government has not been on our side for a long time. And some people have figured a lot of it out. Some people are starting to figure it out. And some people know something is terribly wrong, but it's too terrifying for them to even look under the covers to figure out what it is, because literally mom and dad are both working to put food on the table for their family. And they're paying a lot in income tax. And even though they know probably the income tax is wrong, they just don't have time to figure out what to do about any of it. They check their 401ks, their IRAs, they're trying to save money. Inflation is out of control. The debt is out of control. We're on the brink of war in a number of places. I'll be heading down to Panama again in a few weeks because that is still a very hot topic down there. We'll get to that in another couple of weeks when I'm down there. Follow Mike Leon for more on that. But this is really just such an amazing time to be alive that if you just embrace the suck, you can put the fear to bed. But what you need to know are the facts. And you need to understand how this house of cards that we're all living in is literally about to collapse. And it has been that way by design by the very same people that are in control of the intelligence community. They're in control of the military industrial complex. They're in control of the corporate government and the 10 square miles of DC. And they've managed to get control of all the corporate state governments down to the municipal level. And it is all about the great taking. And you've been sucker punched and your wallet has been raided for over a century now. It's disgusting. It's despicable. We are nothing but chattel. Joining me today to talk about the great taking and a movie that's coming out about how all of this has gone down. And folks, I want you to kind of stop what you're doing and get your pen and paper out because you're going to want to take notes. Please share this out, get it out to as many people as possible, because everybody in this country is probably trying to save money in some form or fashion. But what they don't realize is that money, frankly, isn't even theirs. Joining me now is James Patrick. He is behind this new movie coming out called The Great Taking. James Patrick, good to see you again. Boy, the last time I ran into you, I think we were somewhere in Idaho, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this movie is startling, and that trailer to lead people into it, if they paid attention at all, is quite terrifying. So take me back to how you got involved in this and working with some of these incredible people in this movie.
Well, I've been researching how the banking system works, who's really behind things, and that sort of led me to the central banks, the Federal Reserve, and that the big international banking interests really run our federal government. But then I think I research a lot in Austrian economics, and I'm doing a doctorate in Spain under the mentor of Javier Milei as well. So, but anyway, I spoke at a conference a year and a half ago and met David Webb, and he sort of brought me up to speed in how the current issues in the financial system, what are the activities of the bankers now, how do the markets work, and he honed in on this kind of open secret in the highest levels of the finance industry that for the last 30 years or more, the biggest banks have been using everyone's stocks and bonds as collateral on their own derivatives trade. So I want everyone to understand that this does affect you, that this involves every stock or bond, whether it's owned by an individual, a pension fund, your 401k, the state pension funds. Basically 95% of the stock market is these big institutional funds. And that basically in the 70s, the banks, they started to pool all the securities to get rid of the share certificates and put them in pooled form at Deposit Trust Clearing Corporation, this trust in New York, in street name of CEDA and Company. And then bankers told me, like, well, in the 80s, they started to really dip into them and use them for their own gain, pledging them as collateral on their own bets, but not just one time, but many times over in these collateral chains. So And then in the 90s, they legalized the practice and put it into the Uniform Commercial Code. And the way they did this was they said, okay, well, they substituted your clear property title. They said you don't really legally own the stock anymore. Now you own a contractual claim on a stock called the securities entitlement. So really the DTCC, the clearinghouse, they have the ownership, and they have the legal ownership. You have the beneficial ownership. So you have a package of rights that constitute all the economic benefits of owning it, minus really owning it.
But let's just stop. Can we just pause right there and absorb what you just said? Because that to me is it's so breathtaking. We are the beneficiaries, supposedly, of owning a stock that we paid for, and it's being held by this organization, the DTCC. And that organization is taking your stock and collateralizing it and loaning out the value to others. So therefore, or they're using it to collateralize it to take money in themselves, to basically overextend.
Yeah, they're allowing the biggest banks to use it out of them. They're like a collateral manager. So they're the central securities depository.
Did you and I sign anything that said they could do that?
I think it does constitute illegal fraud because the client doesn't know, and if someone wraps you up in some deal that you weren't properly informed of, I think you could argue that's fraud. Now they set up all these legal barriers in the UCC. They said, oh, well, if the proverbial shit hits the fan or whatever, you can only sue your broker, not the DTCC. So they've set up this little this structure to kind of insulate DTCC from legally being sued. But I think the whole thing is very fraudulent, and the underlying clients do not know that their funds are being used. So I think it is criminal. If you do see a big loss, if there is a collapse and they do take everyone's stocks as collateral, then there'll be all kinds of angry people. To date, they've sort of kept the system moving along. There hasn't been a massive collapse. Like, I guess one example was in the Lehman Brothers case. Actually, the clients did lose all their assets. So that's one case where it did occur. And but the second legal thing they put in the UCC, the 1994 Article 8 revision to legalize this, they said as well, the secured creditors of all those contracts, that they're the chain of contracts, they're encumbering your stocks, they're using your stocks again and again in all these bets, that the creditors of the bets have a priority ahead of the entitlement holders. So, the significance of making a contractual claim was that in bankruptcy law, a contractual claim is very weak. It comes last. The secured creditors come first. It's like if you take a loan out on your house, the bank is the secured creditor of the house, and you might owe all these different people money on contracts, like your roofer, a painter, or whatever. But they all come after the bank. The bank gets their money first. So they said, that the banks that play with you, the creditors of all these contracts of them playing with your money have priority ahead of the client.
Right. So again, just so we're clear, the bankers, the people who set up the Federal Reserve, the income tax, all of this, did it, by the way, in the dark of night without even a quorum and voting. They just went ahead and did these things, and our Congress just went along with it, interestingly enough. And I put a piece out this morning. We'll play it here in a little bit, but about the income tax and what a fraud that is. But they are behind the creation of all of this, shall we say, shit made up. The UCC as well as the U.S. Code, which are rules for thee, but not for us. I mean, it's really supposed to apply to them, but they don't follow their own rules. They just use those rules to get themselves to the front of the line, which is basically what you're telling us here. In the UCC, bankers always get paid before any other creditor out there or debtor out there. Somebody who is owed money, the banks get paid first, correct?
Yeah, it's sort of like the industry started to just commit this fraud, use everyone's stocks and bonds for their own gain. And then it got really big in the 80s, and then 90s, they sort of legalized it. And then in the EU, really in the 2000s, late 2000s, it was done in the EU, using the same structure. And even the lawyer that wrote the Article 8, 1994 revision, he wrote this 90-page document explaining the rationale for why they did it. And he says in there, only 5 people understand this. is the most esoteric part of the UCC. So you really could just have a few bankers kind of behind this thing, a few interested parties that hired some lawyers, got this done, got it passed in all 50 states over some years, and no one really understands it. I mean, it's just it shows you how something so big can be done with so few people understanding it.
Right, because again, the people are trusting that their titles of nobility, bankers and lawyers, are supposed to be the good guys, and you're supposed to be able to trust them. Hell, you're paying thousands of dollars to these people to manage your assets and to make sure they got your back. But they're just literally, as they're behind you, robbing you from the back. They're robbing you from your wallet. So tell me the difference between, say, the Bernie Madoff scandal, where Bernie went to prison, and apparently the people that had lost everything are getting some kind of financial remuneration back. What's the difference between what happened with Bernie Madoff and his hedge fund versus, say, Lehman, where the people who invested their stuff and Lehman was holding everything lost everything?
The Bernie Madoff was kind of a classic Ponzi scheme. So he was just stealing people's money and bringing.
But isn't that what they're doing in the banks, kind of creating a Ponzi scheme if they're loaning out against your collateralized debt, or your collateralized stock certificates that you have allowed them to hold? Are they loaning out a 10x of that certificate, or are they loaning out dollar for dollar value, par value on the certificate?
It could be up to 20 times or more.
Isn't that a Ponzi scheme then?
Yeah, well, they're like pledging your stuff as collateral. I think Bernie was just straight up stealing it and then bringing in new people's money. He was just pocketing it.
But some theft between criminals.
They're lending it out, in this kind of crazy way again and again and again, and the whole thing could kind of stay together. But it's just when there's that much speculation using other people's money, you end up seeing this kind of euphoria and crazy bubble that develops, and that risks collapsing. So if that whole bubble busts, then it could cascade through and then cause everyone's stocks and bonds to be taken as collateral. So just to give you an idea, the numbers we're talking about, like in DTCC, there's about $89 trillion of stocks and bonds, and in Euroclear, I think there's like 37 trillion euros. So it's like 130 trillion dollars worth of stocks and bonds kept in this pooled form, and then there's a derivatives market of like probably around $2 quadrillion is pyramided off of this 130 trillion collateral base. So that's like 15 to 20 times up if you look at these orders of magnitude. It's hard to know exactly the exact numbers of the derivatives market because it's not all public. But just this is the kind of magnitude, the orders of magnitude you're talking about. It's impossible to have a $2 quadrillion derivatives market if they're not using everyone's securities as collateral. And there's lots of documents and coming out of the Bank of International Settlements, the Federal Reserve, the Financial Stability Board, and showing that this is a widespread industry practice, that there's automated collateral management systems, run out of DTCC that use everyone's stocks and bonds in an automated global fashion. The view is to be able to use all securities as collateral. And this is really a dangerous structure to have in place, because for our property rights, this totally undermines, over 1,000 years of property rights, really the rule of law. And then in the 2008 crisis, that it was made worse, where they introduced this idea of a too big to fail bank or a systemically important financial institution. And they sort of started creating this legal precedent of like, oh, well, there's these oligarchical banks with more rights than the average stockholder. And I think that's like that right there is creating a feudal system where you're saying, well, there's these privileged banks that could commit fraud, go bust, get bailed out, while everyone else has to pick up the bill for them. Mm-hmm. And that is just tyrannical, insane. I don't think doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make legal sense. So, it's the creation of a new feudal system within the financial system.
Yeah, and frankly, that's what we did 250 years ago. We told King, George III, hey, see you later, dude. We are out of here because we're done paying you the king's ransom just to live and breathe on your property. He owned everything. And, they bailed out and came over here, and, the rest is history. But they intended, when we got over here, and we did have land patents, and you were granted the actual, property rights, lock, stock, and barrel. There was no property tax. None of that existed when we first arrived here and created America and started with the colonies and so forth. And it was over time that they recognized, well, we have got to, the king, and of course, didn't want to give up America because he recognized how wealthy this country is. And I'm not just talking about the people, I'm talking about what's in the ground, what we can produce out of this country. We are really the crown jewel of the world. And I do believe, James, that God created us as his second covenant nation. So this has really been, I think, what the Great Taking all originates to, and from my opinion, going right back into the city of London. Those international bankers rigged the system from the word go, and they infiltrated. And the Civil War wasn't about necessarily freeing the slaves, although that's how history has written it. It was more about how they can infiltrate and take over state legislatures and force us into a centralized country again under the United States citizenry. And that's how they turned us back into, we lost our sovereignty. We became citizens of a one nation. As opposed to, states, sovereign states, as a, union of states coming together for the common defense. We became centralized, and therein lies the problem. I've been putting pieces out about this for the last couple of days, trying to explain to people they've usurped our sovereignty with the 14th, and they weaponized it against President Trump, talking about insurrection. So it's we are really sort of reliving history, but I think we're trying to untangle it and show how the art of deception was really quite sophisticated. And this presentation you're talking about is a financial raping of America. And they're doing it in broad daylight. They publish it. It's put out in US code. But do you read all the US code? Well, you probably do. But do you read the UCC in its entirety? Do most people?
Nobody does. No.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
But it's there. They told you. They said it. They printed it out, and it's been published. I mean, the devil's going to tell you what he's going to do. It's part of his part of his order is he has to tell you how he's going to punish you. It's up to us to open our eyes and see it. So,
yeah.
So what's the path forward out of this mess?
Well, I think we need this issue is unique in that we really can do something about it, because this change was made on the state level in each state, and because the situs of the location of your assets, usually contract law is centered around the location of the assets. So they changed the UCC code in all 50 states, and it can be fixed in all 50 states. And we have some lawyers helping us introduce bills in around the country to amend Article 8. And the way the bankers wrote the Article 8 code was saying, it was really sneaky. They said, you have property rights, except all the time when you don't. So what we're doing is just striking these exceptions, and that allows people to then write contracts in those states where they do have clear title to their stock. So we, in this film, Stop It, The Great Taking, which you can watch at The Great Taking Report. I'm also publishing a monthly detailed report on this issue, documenting it. But basically, this film follows the first legislative effort in 2024, where bills were introduced in South Dakota and Tennessee to fix the issue. And then we have this year it was introduced to, I think, in 12 states. Now, so far, the bankers have really been able to block these bills. But I'd like people to understand that they can make a difference. And if enough of us call in and demand that our property rights to our own life savings is protected, we can really make this change. And I think it's possible. So, and we got their attention. I mean, in Tennessee, a member of the Guggenheim family came down and testified against this. And he almost practically lied on the stand. He was saying, "Oh no, your property rights are intact." But then upon cross questioning, they were like, "Are you using all the stocks and bonds as collateral?" And he goes, "Yeah, well, that's kind of how the plumbing of the system works, So this is out in the open now. They can't hide it. Really, in the state legislatures where we've introduced it, the tactic they've been using is to bring up another confusing issue and try to confuse the matter. So they said, "Oh, well, if you do this bill, then you won't be able to have margin accounts on your stocks, like use your stocks, pledge them to bet on other things." So, I think people need to pressure their state representatives now And I mean, you can protect yourself by buying gold, getting land, things like that, physical assets. If you actually request your physical share certificates, they're not being used in pooled form. So then you do have clear title. But if we have a derivatives collapse, the market collapses, the values of everything are going to go down. You're going to live in a really messy society. So it's important that we fix it up front here before we have a problem, and restore our property rights by calling your state representative. So at the Great Taking Report, you can find links to to find your local state representative, and we have lawyers in place that will help your state rep introduce the bill, they'll write the bills for them, and help them explain it.
Okay, I'm just going to put this up on the screen because I want folks to see it. This is thegreattakingreport.com. Thegreattakingreport.com. I've also got it streaming below in the red bar below, bigpicture.watch. And it has where you can actually donate to help, continue to further the work for this movie. I think this is incredibly important. I mean, this is citizen journalism, getting the truth out there and uncovering the fraud by deception and obfuscation of not being clear with the American people. This is why they invented the bar, the British Admiralty Registry, or accredited registry, however you want to look at it. This is for the bar card mafia, the lawyers and judges out there that speak in legal fiction. And that's why it's called legal fiction. It's shit made up. And I mean, it literally is legal fiction. It's a fancy language they teach you in law school so that the common man can't understand it, which is why our Constitution is actually written in sorry, I don't know what's going on with this silly thing. Our Constitution is written in common English, plain old common law English, so that any man or woman can read it, interpret it, and know how to use it to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. So what you're doing in your movie is tremendous because it's allowing people to understand just how they've been raped financially. And we need to now take precautions. You're talking about getting paper stock certificates and holding them yourself in your own vault, in your own safe, wherever, but not at the DTCC or at any other brokerage house, whether it's UBS or whatever. Like, physically take ownership of that paper so you can say, I own these shares of Exxon or whatever it is, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what it looks like is it's a sophisticated legal structure to use all the assets, create this balloon, and then be able to collapse it and seize all of them.
Right.
In a 1929 style collapse with the 33 gold seizure, 1933 seizure of all the gold.
Is there, in your opinion, is there a pending date of doom when they might try to do this? Or do you have any sort of sense about this? Ed Dowd was on yesterday talking about that, the housing and the economy. And he was talking about how the reverse cycle of these illegals leaving the country is opening up rentals, which is bringing down the price of rentals and the price of homes. But that he expects it to taper off and things be better by the end of the year. This is a whole next level kind of, oh shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly when it would happen, but it's sort of been set up by these financial interests. So, I don't know. It's like they're playing with chess pieces. They got international war, world war. They're trying to start now with Russia and China and Israel and all. So there's all this stuff going on, and but this is definitely like a chess piece they put in place. And I think documents from the UN with their C40 initiative and World Economic Forum talking about these poorer world where we don't eat dairy and meat, where we live in a little 15-minute city without cars, that we only have a few outfits and one long haul trip every few years. They're talking
take a
about
shower once a month because you want to conserve water.
They're talking about a poorer world where people are at a much lower standard of living, which is totally different than today. So I think it's that insane. It looks like they're planning for some kind of a downgrade in people's standard of living and putting us on kind of a CBDC on a public dole. So
not happening. It's not going to happen, James. President Trump talked about it yesterday when he was talking about, modernizing the financial system and how Treasury is going to pay bills using, electronic payments. He said, but not CBDC. He was very clear in his executive order. So I think they're just these doomsayers are continuing to push something that I don't see them being able to do unless we don't have some kind of a solution for the Bank of International Settlements and or the DTCC and the demons that are pushing this. And I got to believe that Trump's first executive order of his first term would address the people behind these moves, i.e., these are people that are doing bad things, i.e., child trafficking, crimes against humanity, which immediately creates an asset seizure and asset forfeiture scenario where these corporations lose everything, and it comes into the into the treasury, into the United States, and the government takes control. Do you have any sense of something like that that could prevent a doomsday scenario like you've just presented financially?
What could prevent it, you mean, with Trump or something? Or what?
Yeah, I mean, his first executive order he signed in 2017 was about asset forfeiture and seizure if you
Mm,
are committing crimes against humanity. And let's face it, a lot of these
yeah,
companies that roll into the DTCC and the BIS have been involved in human trafficking. BlackRock, Vanguard,
yeah.
they own lots of subsidiaries. They're all owned by the same people. So would that not sort of predisclose them from being able to accomplish their ultimate goal? I would think Trump's trying to work through this somehow, but I don't know. That could be
Well,
hoping and unspoken.
he's opposed CBDCs, but he's moving ahead with all these stablecoin legislation. So they which is sort of a private issue. It's the banks are issuing all these dollar denominated tokenized deposits. So there's sort of like a bank private crypto, and that can do the same things as CBDCs that we're worried about. So at the same time he's saying no CBDCs, he is authorizing things that create the same problem. So like Mr. Lutnick, his one of his top guys, he was sitting on Counter Fitzgerald. They're the biggest custodian for Tether, that stable coin. So, the use of these Tether stablecoin tokenized deposits, that's the same sort of tyrannical controls can be achieved through those too. So I think while they're saying no CBDCs, they're moving ahead in a way that, because CBDCs are not really constitutional here.
Right.
They'd have a lot of legal problems pushing a CBDC in the U.S. So the way they're looking at it is, well, maybe we'll have a more controlled society with more anti-money laundering regulations, know your customer, kind of the bank risk. The financial regulations might ratchet up, and then they use these private issue stable coins to achieve the same thing as CBDC. So I don't know if Trump's getting the best advice on that front.
Well, is he
Yeah.
then potentially, by supporting this, putting our money, our trust into the hands of a few oligarchs, financial, crypto oligarchs that control a variety of stable coins that might be the top three we jump into, and therefore we're just as much at risk because they have access to all of our everything. And it's
Yeah, I mean, the whole
out of the
crypto,
Federal Reserve, but into some other oligarchs' basket.
yeah, the whole crypto digital money space, the rise of Bitcoin and all this stuff, it sort of brings us to this cashless society, this digitized society. I mean, it takes many decades to build such things out, to have everything tracked and monitored and cataloged, and so we're still in that process of that build out, and it's pretty scary, like
So
I really don't.
do you think that the great taking is going to sort of be the precursor to the final build out of the digital cashless society, because they don't want to lose track of the money and have it scattered into other oligarchs' hands? They want to kind of keep it in the Federal Reserve, international banking cabals.
Well, the great thinking would be like how to bring us to our knees and all this stuff for these control systems to get control. So I think they'd have to be, you probably want to have those systems in place or ready to spring on you before you collapse them. So I'd say we're at least a couple years away from that, but I don't know. David Webb is he's always thinking it's going to happen right away. Another Martin Armstrong, another friend of mine, he's saying he doesn't see U.S. collapsing in the next 5 years. He's seeing Europe plunge into this idiotic war with Russia, and then they're going to go, a lot of money will come to U.S. So I don't know, there's different opinions on it, but the great taking scenario is a way to sort of take everyone's stuff, bring people to a lower position. And then they need these digital systems, I think, need a little more time to mature to get them to the state where they can really get us with them, which is, from what I'm seeing, probably 3 to 5 years away.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but
Okay. Well, food for thought. Pretty horrible. I'm just checking some chats right now. Let's see. Over in One Rumble, we've got Sabbath 1974 talking about the War of 1812 was threatened and initiated by British central bankers in retaliation for not renewing the charter of America's branch of the central banking cabal. Learn more about the globalist central bankers who foment and instigate wars in order to sell bullets and bandages to both sides and stipulate that the war, quote, winner must pay off war debts of war loser. And they put a couple of stuff in there. Thank you, Sabbath 1974. Appreciate that. So interesting. Very, very interesting what we're learning here today. And frankly, when I read about the DTCC about a year and a half ago, I remember going into my husband's office and saying, "Are you aware of this?" And he'd heard about it. But, when you start to really put pen to paper and think about what's going on here, you realize, Jesus, as Klaus Schwab said, we really don't own anything and we're not happy anymore. He's lying about the happy part.
Yeah. Yeah. People know like pieces of the puzzle, but that's what I'm trying to help people do is put the pieces together to see the big picture.
Okay. So where's the best place for folks to go and see The Great Taking?
It's thegreattakingreport.com.
Okay. Thegreattakingreport.com. James Patrick, thank you so much. Is there any final thoughts you want to splash out here before you bug out?
Yeah, I would say watch the film, get educated on the issue. If you want to know more, subscribe to the report and call your state representatives and tell them, look, we need to restore our property rights to our securities. It's our life savings, and this affects you. This affects everyone. And really, you can do something about this. And we have lawyers in place at truenorthpublicpolicy.com who can help steer the whole process once you do that. But we need people to get active and not just sit around passively consuming all this information, but really making a difference.
I completely agree. I tell people all the time, I'm just going to pull up this website here, truenorthpublicpolicy.com.
It's TRU.
Oh, no wonder. Right. I was like, that doesn't look right. True North.
TRU, then public policy.
True North or just true?
Just True North Public Policy, but true without an E.
Right.
TRU.
I'm glad we correct that because I'm like, whoops, there we go. True North Public Policy. That looks more like it. Property rights and the great taking. When the locusts come. Yep. Good stuff. Well, this is a great website. I'm glad you've turned me on to this. I'm going to scour this later. This is fantastic.
So these are the guys that can help your state legislator. They're the like legal support team for getting these bills done. So they're writing the bills, helping communicate it. They come and testify in the hearing. So we have a whole. This is way more than you get on any issue you've ever covered. Is like a full lobbying team, basically.
Wow. Does it cost anything to engage with these guys?
No, I mean, David's kicking some of his book sales to them, and I think they could use some help as well. So they're just doing it, out of their own goodwill.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
really, really great. Wow, it's just thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. This has been fantastic, terrifying, but fantastic. And again, knowledge is power. If you don't want to lose everything, got to get in the game. General Flynn says, local action, national impact. What are you doing to get off the couch? And it's great to be a keyboard warrior. I mean, I'm one, so I get it. It's great to do all that, but you got to get out. I'll be out in the field for the next 2.5 weeks, maybe even longer if I leave from, I go straight to Panama after. You got to be out to see what's going on. And yeah, I'll report on it, but I'm also getting engaged with what we do at American Made Foundation and American Made Action. We're taking action to the judicial system, the corrupt family law courts, and we're trying to support some of the victims of these horrific unconstitutional agencies and what they fake judicial branch. They're not even close to constitutional law. It's just disgusting. And that's what we're seeing here. The great fraud has now led to the great taking out of our backside. All right. James Patrick, always great to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Wow, that's pretty explosive, huh? And again, I read about the DTCC maybe a year and a half ago and was just like gobsmacked. I'm like, oh my God, just when you think it can't get any more ridiculous, it gets more horrendous. These people have figured out using legalese and, shit made up, these UCCs and the UCS. It's just all stuff made up, and it does nothing except smother our rights as human beings, as, children of God, God's law of nature, constitutional law, one and the same, right? The Constitution was drafted and invoking the word of our Creator 4 times in what my friend Maureen Steele calls the greatest love letter to America was our Declaration and our Constitution. So we have got we've got a little bit more to do here. I wanted to share a couple things really quickly with you before I let you go. Right here, I had a post that went out yesterday, and I just think it's probably worth showing to you guys in case you haven't seen it. Right here, let me just make it on the big screen and I'll blow it up for you. But this one is true. This one's going to hurt. Did you know the 14th Amendment was never lawfully ratified? 41% of the states said no. Congress ignored the Constitution. Military force installed puppet governments. What did we lose? We lost our state sovereignty, our republic, and our freedom. It's time for the reckoning and the rising. Take a listen to this right now, and we'll share it out. You know, people say we need to fix 2020. Well, I say we need to fix 1868. Did you know that the 14th Amendment, the one that redefined citizenship, centralized power, and created the very framework used today to silence dissent, was never even lawfully ratified? That's right. According to congressional record, 15 of the 37 states rejected the amendment. That's 41% of the union, far more than the 1/4 needed to actually kill it dead. And guess what? Congress ignored it. The president never even signed the resolution as required by Article 1, Section 7. So what did they do instead? They used military force, overthrew legitimate state governments, installed puppet legislatures, and rammed the 14th Amendment through by force. Before 1868, we were Americans, sovereign individuals of sovereign states. After, we became U.S. citizens under the federal jurisdiction, taxable, trackable, disposable. And now Section 3 of that illegitimate amendment, the so-called insurrection clause, was used to try to bar President Trump from office. But here's the kicker. Trump hasn't even been charged with insurrection. No trial, no due process, just narrative. The 14th Amendment turned our republic into a federal plantation, and now they want to chain you with the very clause that enslaves your freedom. You see, before 1868 and the unconstitutional ratification of the 14th, we were Americans electing our public servants. After the 14th, our status was changed from Americans living as nationals in states around the Union to U.S. citizens voting in our dead slave masters. But we see it now. We know what they did, and we're taking it back. So you can see, folks, there's been a fraud perpetrated on us for quite some time. And frankly, they are not going to back down. They're not going to back down until they get America back under control. And I submit to you, we are still, the tail is still wagging the dog. They still have control of us. We are now understanding the various elements of control. Doge and Elon Musk's team have done an incredible job of exposing the money, the theft of all of our, printed money, and we're paying the interest in all that printed money, which is why we're in debt for $36 trillion. Do you think that if we had spent $36 trillion, America would look the way it does today? Have you driven coast to coast? Have you gone from city to city just to see how bad it is? If you haven't, I suggest that you do. Because when you drive through and you see the infrastructure that is just dilapidated from city to city, it's heartbreaking. You walk around these cities and you see homeless everywhere sleeping on the streets. It's heartbreaking. $20 billion would get every homeless person off the street and in a house or an apartment. But we send hundreds of billions to Ukraine, to Israel, to other countries. Our CIA goes around the world fomenting color revolutions with members of our own State Department to overthrow governments, install their puppet regime masters so that they can launder, again, printed Federal Reserve money right here in the good old United States of America and send it overseas so that it can be laundered back into their coffers. I think we've now learned there's been over 50,000 different NGOs and accounts that have had money laundered. This is just, it's like unfathomable. It's a joke. And frankly, we are now the laughing stock of the world because everyone's going, oh my God, America has been funding everything. So you ask yourself, what is a fiat dollar even worth? Why do we pay income tax? Well, I'm going to share something else with you right now because I think you need to take a look at this when it comes to why are we paying income tax. I just put this out today and it's also going viral. It's only been out for less than an hour. So I want you guys to take a look at this and tell me what you think. You've been told federal income tax applies to every American. But what if that's a lie by omission? Title 26, the tax code, applies only within one place, the District of Columbia, not your state, not your home, just this 10 square mile jurisdiction. Michael L. White, federal attorney at the National Archives, confirms, and I quote, "No IRS rule requiring income tax returns has ever been published in the Federal Register," end quote. That means no publication, no obligation. Without publication, there's no legal force outside DC. That's the law. The Constitution is the supreme law. We, the people, are sovereign. The government, our servants, bound to common law and the original intent of the founders. George Mason laid it out clearly. The people grant power, the people revoke it. An amendment is not a repeal, according to the Supreme Court in 1956. You're not a quoted sovereign citizen. You're a sovereign. You don't obey unlawful laws. You uphold God's law, common law, constitutional law. Read your Constitution. Reclaim your rights. Share the truth. There you have it, folks. I don't know how to make it any more clear than that. We've been had, and no more. We're getting as much information out as possible, so please share this show out. Follow me on X at Ann Vandersteel. I have a Substack also where I put a lot of material out there in long form. I write articles. There was an article published about that video that you saw in more detail to give you more evidence, to give you the receipts that you need. So you don't have to take my word for it. I'll go dig up the answers for you and publish them and link them so that you can be just as informed and you can make better decisions about your future. Knowledge is power. And that's why we're here at Steel News every day, in the trenches, in the war zone. And I don't know when I'll be back again. I'm fixing to go out of town, but you'll catch me putting videos up pretty regularly, doing shows as necessary when information warrants getting shared out there further. Have a great afternoon, everybody. God bless you and God bless America. Till next time.